In the face of danger, one young boy, abandoned by society, leaps into action to save a child he's never met. But what happens next will leave you questioning everything. The sun beats down on the city streets, casting long shadows over the cracked sidewalks. The world moves around Malek in a blur of hurried footsteps, car horns, and conversations that never include him. He walks with his head down, his small hands stuffed into the oversized pockets of his worn-out hoodie. His stomach growls, but he ignores it. Hunger is nothing new. At 10 years old, Malik has learned to blend into the background. People walk past him without a second glance, their eyes sliding over him as if he doesn't exist. He has mastered the art of being invisible, knowing that the moment he is noticed, the world can be cruel. Today is just another day of searching for scraps, another day of finding a safe place to sleep before the cold creeps in. He scans the sidewalks, looking for half-eaten food left on benches, a discarded sandwich someone was too full to finish. But all he finds are indifferent faces, people too lost in their own lives to notice the small boy walking alone. Then a sharp cry cuts through the noise. Malik's head snaps up. Across the street, a woman is screaming, her arms outstretched in horror. She is frozen, her mouth open in a soundless gasp. At first, Malik doesn't understand what's happening. Then he sees it. A baby stroller, small, fragile, and completely out of control, rolling toward the street. Time slows. The stroller wobbles, its wheels catching on the uneven pavement before it tips forward slightly, gaining speed. A few people turn their heads, their eyes widening in alarm, but no one moves. The light at the intersection turns green. A car engine revs. Malik doesn't think. His body moves before his mind can catch up. He sprints forward, his feet pounding against the pavement. The stroller is already halfway into the street, the infant inside unaware of the danger rushing toward it. Malik pushes harder, his breath burning in his chest. A car horn blares. The woman's screams grow louder. Malik lunges. Malik has spent most of his life blending into the background, surviving in a world that refuses to see him. The streets have been his home for as long as he can remember. He doesn't know what it feels like to have a warm bed, a family waiting for him at the dinner table, or even a place to call his own. He moves through the city unseen, another nameless face in a sea of strangers who pass him by without a second glance. Each day is a battle. He wakes up in alleyways, in abandoned buildings, or wherever he can find shelter from the cold. His clothes, tattered and stained, barely shield him from the elements. Hunger gnaws at him constantly, a dull ache he has learned to ignore. He scavenges for food in garbage bins behind restaurants, hoping for leftovers that weren't completely spoiled. Sometimes he gets lucky. Most times he doesn't. People see him, but they don't see him. They notice the dirt on his face, the unwashed hair, the oversized clothes hanging loosely off his thin frame. They look at him with pity, sometimes even disgust. Mothers clutch their purses tighter when he walks past. Store owners eye him warily, ready to shoo him away if he lingers too long near their windows. No one asks his name. No one wonders about the boy behind the grime. He is invisible. Until now. The man whose baby he saved is nothing like him. The businessman is powerful, wealthy beyond what Malik can even comprehend. He lives in a world of luxury, of tailored suits, expensive cars, and penthouse apartments that sit high above the city. From the outside, his life seems perfect. He is the kind of man people respect, admire, and envy. He has everything Malik does not: money, security, and the privilege of being seen. But beneath the polished image, he is struggling. His life is not as perfect as it appears. His marriage is crumbling, torn apart by long nights at the office and emotional distance that can no longer be ignored. His success, built on years of ruthless ambition, has come at a cost. He barely knows his own child. The baby he almost lost today is the one thing in his life that still feels pure, untainted by the weight of expectation and failure. And yet, despite all his wealth, all his influence, he couldn't protect his own child. Malik did. The realization hits him hard. As he stands in the courtroom holding his crying baby in his arms, he watches the boy who risked everything to save his child try to disappear into the background once again. He sees the way Malik shrinks under the weight of attention, how uncomfortable he looks being noticed. And for the first time in his life, the businessman feels something unfamiliar: guilt. He had never thought twice about children like Malik before. He had walked past them on the streets, stepping around them without a second thought, just like everyone else. He had told himself, "It's not my problem. Someone else will help." But no one had helped. No one had saved this boy from a life of hunger, from a world that refused to acknowledge his existence. And yet, Malik had saved his child. The irony is not lost on him. He clears his throat, tightening his grip on his son as he takes a step toward Malik. "Wait," he calls out, his voice steady, but filled with something that wasn't there before. Malik stops, but doesn't turn around. He hesitates, as if unsure whether he should keep walking or face the man who represents everything he has never had. The businessman exhales, glancing down at his son before looking back at the boy who had just changed everything. For the first time in his life, he truly sees Malik, and he knows, without a doubt, that this moment is about to change them both. The world around Malik blurs into a chaotic rush of motion and sound. The honking of horns, the screeching of tires, the collective gasps from the bystanders, all of it fades into the background as his focus narrows to one thing: the stroller racing toward danger. His legs move before his mind can process what he's doing. His small, frail frame propels forward with a force he doesn't even know he has. The stroller wobbles wildly, hitting a crack in the pavement and tilting dangerously forward. Malik lunges, his fingers just barely grasping the handle. The baby inside is completely unaware, its tiny hands grasping at the air, its round eyes blinking curiously, as if it doesn't sense the life-threatening danger it is in. Malik plants his feet, digging into the ground as he yanks the stroller back, the weight of it nearly knocking him off balance. His arms burn, his chest heaves, but he doesn't let go. He can't let go. A car horn blares so loudly it rattles his bones. He turns his head just in time to see a car skidding toward him, the tires screaming against the asphalt. The driver's face is frozen in shock, his hands gripping the wheel, trying to stop in time. Malik doesn't have time to think. With every ounce of strength in his thin body, he pulls the stroller backward, his heels scraping against the road. The force sends him tumbling onto his back, the stroller jerking to a stop just inches from the front bumper of the oncoming vehicle. The car comes to a violent halt, its front end barely a foot from where Malik now lies, his chest heaving. Silence. For a moment, nothing moves. The world that had been rushing past so carelessly is suddenly frozen in place. Then slowly, people begin to react. Gasps ripple through the crowd that has gathered at the edge of the sidewalk. A woman clutches her chest, her mouth open in disbelief. A man, who had been too slow to react, shakes his head in stunned silence. Someone mutters, "That kid. He just saved that baby's life." The mother, her face streaked with tears, shoves through the frozen spectators and sprints toward Malik. She nearly collapses as she reaches them, her shaking hands fumbling with the straps of the stroller, checking her child over with frantic desperation. The baby gurgles, blissfully unaware, completely unharmed. She lets out a sob of relief, then turns to Malik, who is still sitting on the pavement, stunned, his hands scraped from where he caught himself. "You—" Her voice breaks as she kneels beside him, grabbing his shoulders as if making sure he's real. "You saved my baby." Malik blinks at her, still breathing hard, his body trembling from the adrenaline coursing through him. He doesn't know what to say. He's not used to being spoken to like this, not used to being seen. The people around them begin to stir, their murmurs growing louder. A few step forward hesitantly, unsure of how to react. "Where did he come from?" someone whispers. "That kid ran straight into the street." Another voice says in disbelief, I thought it was too late." The driver of the car gets out, still pale from the near miss. He looks at Malik, then at the stroller, then back at the boy again. "Jesus, kid," he exhales, running a hand through his hair. "You're lucky to be alive." But Malik doesn't feel lucky. He feels exhausted. He feels overwhelmed. He feels noticed. For the first time in as long as he can remember, people aren't ignoring him. They aren't stepping over him on the sidewalk, pretending he doesn't exist. They are looking at him with something he doesn't quite understand, something like respect. The mother still holds on to him, tears dripping onto the pavement. "What's your name?" she asks softly. Malik swallows, his throat dry. "Malik." Her grip on his shoulders tightens. "Malik," she repeats as if committing it to memory. "You saved my baby. You're—" She shakes her head, her voice breaking. "You're a hero." A hero? No one has ever called him that before. The crowd seems to take in her words, and slowly, something unexpected happens. A few people nod. A man near the front claps once, then again. Another joins him. And then, before Malik can process it, the entire crowd erupts into applause. For him. Malik grips his scraped hands together, unsure of what to do, unsure of how to accept something he has never been given, recognition. But deep in his chest, something unfamiliar sparks. For once, he is not just another forgotten face in the city. For once, he is not invisible. The sound of sirens wails in the distance, blending with the murmurs of the gathered crowd. The chaos of the moment begins to settle. But Malik still feels like he's caught in the eye of a storm. He isn't used to this, being seen, being acknowledged. He is used to slipping into the background, unnoticed, unwanted. But now, people are looking at him like he matters. Then, the crowd parts. A man rushes forward, his expensive shoes clacking against the pavement. His suit, perfectly tailored and pressed, looks out of place against the gritty backdrop of the street. He moves with urgency, pushing past bystanders until he reaches the woman still clutching the stroller. His face is tight with fear. His breath's heavy. "Is he okay?" he demands, his voice shaking as his eyes dart to the baby. The woman, still emotional, nods quickly. He's fine. He's safe. She grips the stroller tighter before turning to the boy who had risked his life. Because of him. The man's gaze follows hers, landing on Malik for the first time. For a moment, he doesn't react. He just stares. He had expected, what exactly? Another businessman? A father? Someone older? But standing before him is a child, thin, trembling slightly, his clothes worn and dirty. A child who shouldn't have had to do something so brave. a child who shouldn't have had to be alone. You, the man exhales, still trying to catch up with reality. You saved my son? Malik nods once, uncertain. Yeah. His voice is quiet, hesitant, like he doesn't know if saying it out loud makes it real. The businessman steps forward, his hand outstretched, as if he means to shake Malik's, but then he hesitates. He isn't sure what to do. What do you say to the boy who just risked his life for your child? Thank you, he says, but it doesn't feel like enough. Malik shrugs. It's okay. It's not. Nothing about this is okay. The businessman feels something in his chest tighten as he takes in the boy before him. He knows the look in Malik's eyes. It's the look of someone who expects nothing. No reward, no praise, no recognition. It's the look of someone who has spent his entire life being overlooked. The woman, still emotional, clears her throat. He doesn't have anyone, she says softly, her voice breaking. He's homeless. The businessman stiffens. Homeless. The word lingers in the air, cutting through the noise, making the moment even heavier. This child, this hero, has no home. A wave of guilt washes over him, hitting like a punch to the gut. He had walked past children like Malik before. He had ignored them, told himself it wasn't his problem. He had lived his entire life believing he understood struggle because of his own personal battles, his failing marriage, his business pressures, his constant need to live up to expectations. But none of that compared to this. He had everything, and Malik had nothing. Yet, when faced with life or death, it was Malik who had acted, not him. Malik, a boy with no home, no family, no safety, had run into the street without hesitation to save a child he didn't even know. And what had he, a powerful businessman, ever done for someone like Malik? Nothing. The realization makes his throat tighten. He looks at Malik again, really looks at him, and he sees something he hadn't before. Not just a brave boy. A child who deserves more. A child who has never been given more. Something shifts inside him. Malik, he says, his voice different now, softer, steadier. Where do you live? Malik hesitates. The answer is obvious, but saying it out loud feels like admitting something shameful. He looks down at his scuffed shoes. Nowhere. The businessman inhales deeply, then exhales slowly. He looks at his son, peacefully unaware of the magnitude of this moment, then back at Malik, and he makes a decision that will change both of their lives forever. You don't have to live like this anymore, he says. Malik's eyes snap up, confused. What? I want to help you, the businessman continues, his words deliberate. More than that, I want to take care of you, give you a home, a real one. He pauses, then adds, if you'll let me. The crowd stirs, murmurs spreading through the bystanders who are still listening. The mother gasps softly, covering her mouth in shock. Malik, on the other hand, is frozen. His mind races, trying to process what was just said. A home. A real home. No more sleeping in alleyways. No more digging through trash for food. No more being invisible. His chest tightens. Why? His voice is small, uncertain. The businessman kneels down so they are eye level. Because you deserve it. His voice is thick with emotion. Because you saved my son's life, and now I want to change yours. For the first time, Malik doesn't know what to say. Tears burn at the edges of his eyes, but he blinks them away. He doesn't cry, not in front of people. But his hands tremble as he grips the sleeves of his hoodie, as if holding on to the only thing keeping him grounded. No one has ever wanted him before, but now someone does, and for the first time in his life, he allows himself to hope. What was once a quiet act of heroism, nearly lost in the chaos of a busy city street, has become a story that no one can ignore. News outlets pick it up, reporters write about it, and soon Malik, the homeless boy who risked his life for a stranger's child, becomes a symbol of selflessness and courage. At the center of it all is the businessman. He watches as the world reacts, as people share Malik's story, as the public praises the boy who had nothing but still gave everything. And with every headline, every conversation, he feels the weight of his own past ignorance pressing down on him. He had spent his life building his empire, chasing success, surrounding himself with wealth and power. He had convinced himself that his struggles, his failing marriage, his relentless work schedule, the expectations placed upon him, were the greatest burdens a person could bear. But then he met Malik, and he realized that he had been blind. For years, he had walked past children like Malik without a second thought. He had ignored the problem, told himself it wasn't his responsibility, that the world was simply unfair and there was nothing he could do about it. But that wasn't true, because now he had done something, and it had changed everything. The cameras flash, the microphones are placed in front of him, and the world waits for his words. Standing on the steps of his company's headquarters, the businessman takes a deep breath. He glances at Malik, standing beside him, still wearing his worn-out hoodie, still looking slightly uncomfortable with all the attention. But today, the world sees him. The businessman grips the podium, his voice steady but filled with something unfamiliar, humility. I spent my life believing that success was measured by wealth, by power, by how much I could take from the world. But then, a 10-year-old boy reminded me what real success looks like. He pauses, his eyes scanning the crowd. Malik had nothing. No home, no family, no reason to believe the world would ever do right by him. And yet, when the moment came, he didn't hesitate. He ran straight into danger, not for money, not for recognition, but simply because it was the right thing to do. A hush falls over the crowd. I failed him, the businessman continues, his voice thick with emotion. Not just him, but every child like him. Every person struggling on the streets while people like me walked by, pretending not to see. That ends today. He takes a deep breath before making his final public vow. I am pledging a significant portion of my wealth to organizations that support homeless youth. But more than that, I am committing myself to being present, to listening, to fighting for those who have been ignored for too long. His words ripple through the audience. This isn't just a donation. It isn't just a business move. It is a reckoning. The power of selflessness. Malik listens, his heart pounding. He never asked for this. He never expected anything in return for what he did. He didn't save that baby because he wanted a reward. He saved him because he knew what it felt like to be small, to be powerless, to need someone and have no one. And yet, here he is, standing beside a man who once walked past kids like him without a second glance, now changed because of him. It is overwhelming. But for the first time in his life, Malik allows himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserves this. Malik's story spreads far beyond the city. It sparks conversations in boardrooms, classrooms, and dinner tables. People who once ignored the homeless now stop to talk. Strangers who had never given to charity before begin to donate, to volunteer, to ask what more they can do. And those who had judged Malik before, store owners who shooed him away, pedestrians who avoided eye contact, People who assumed he was nothing more than another forgotten kid on the streets begin to see him differently, not as a burden, not as a statistic, but as a hero. And with that shift in perception comes something even more powerful: change. The city begins implementing new programs for homeless youth. Shelters receive more funding. More children like Malik are given a chance. All because one boy ran into the street without thinking about himself. As the press conference ends and the businessman turns to Malik, there's no longer a divide between them. No longer a world of wealth and power separating them. There is only gratitude and hope. Malik's courage proves that heroes do not always wear capes or stand on grand stages. Sometimes they walk the same streets we do, unnoticed, unheard, fighting battles the world chooses to ignore. His selflessness, born not out of privilege but out of instinct and compassion, shattered every preconceived notion about who a hero could be. When faced with a split-second decision, Malik did not hesitate. He did not stop to consider his own safety, or whether anyone would acknowledge his actions. He did not think about his own hardships, the nights spent sleeping on cold pavement, the hunger that gnawed at him daily. In that moment, he only thought of saving a life, and in doing so, he changed his own. His story reminds us that true worth is not measured by wealth, status, or power. It is measured by the choices we make, by the willingness to act even when no one is watching. Malik, a boy with nothing, gave everything. And in return, the world finally saw him for who he truly was. Not a homeless child, not a statistic, but a person with immeasurable value. Beyond the gratitude, beyond the admiration, his actions forced people to confront uncomfortable truths. How many times had they walked past someone in need, assuming it was not their problem? How often had they ignored the struggles of others simply because it was easier to look away? Malik's story did more than inspire. It demanded reflection. The impact of his bravery stretched far beyond the city streets where he once lived. The businessman who had once been blind to the suffering around him now used his power to fight for those like Malik. The community that had once overlooked him now saw him as a symbol of resilience. Strangers, once indifferent, were moved to action. One act of heroism created a ripple effect, proving that change begins with a single moment, a single decision. Sometimes the greatest acts of heroism come from those who have the least. Malik's story is not just about saving a life. It is about the power of compassion, the strength of the human spirit, and the undeniable truth that kindness has the ability to transform not only one life, but the world around it.